so I'm going to demonstrate the qualitative database so that you are ready to dive in and start both entering data and analyzing data. So first I'll talk about entering data and then analysis. First thing I want to do is remind you about the page of excellent notes that appear on your screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this field form and we're going to enter it into the database. And it's pretty straightforward. First thing I want to show you about the database is when you open it, double click here, it's going to ask you whether or not you want to enable macros. Always enable macros. Trust me, it'll make it much easier. So then you have your database. If I can make it a little bit bigger for you. And there's a few fields that you need to be aware of as you enter data. First, these are the areas we're going to enter, pretty self-explanatory. The community name, the date of the interview, the type of interview. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but essentially we're saying the gender and the type of person, male student, female parent, etc. These are the questions code. These align with the questions that you should be familiar with. Risk categories, the various risks that we've looked at, question text, response, number of chose response, and notes associated. All right, that's the data entry tab. The other area you need to be aware of is the risk worksheet. This also should look a little bit familiar, and this is what you need to complete before you start entering data, because it will help populate the database in a way that's a lot more user-friendly for you. So you can see you're going to basically enter what are the risk areas that you have identified and have done field research on. Right now, if you pay attention to the tabs here, you see only a sRGBV on one of these tabs, and also if we go back to the data entry template, we have the all fields. These will always be here, but then we only have a sRGBV. So if we page down a bit, you can see it jumps right back to the next group, in all, a, all. All right, so if we go to the risk worksheet, let's say we're also interested in looking at gang violence. I'm going to type in yes, click enter, and then this is important, you need to go hit go. It might take a minute depending on the speed of your machine, but just wait, you'll have the little spinny ball. Look down here, and you'll know you're ready when suddenly a new field pops up, specifically B, internal gang, and this is what you just entered yes for. What also happened is on the data entry tab, is suddenly this field appeared as well. So this makes it a whole lot easier for you to enter data because you don't need to look around at all the other risks that were not relevant to your project. So make sure you complete the risk worksheet before anything. I'm going to go ahead and just keep it only at internal school-related gender-based violence because that's what we're going to practice with today. So click go. You'll see this disappear again. It might take a second. And when it's gone, you're ready to move. Okay, it's gone. So let's go to the data entry tab, and what we're going to do is enter the example of good data that appeared on this field form here. All right, so a couple areas you should remember: community school name, this is the respondent type, the date, etc. All this information can be moved over to the database. So let's see. Let's page up to the very top. There's enough room in this database to enter data for up to 40 different focus groups or key informal interviews, and those are indicated by this black bar here. So if you page down, that's group 1, group 2, and so on. So of course you enter the community name. What you see in front of you, you'll have a blank template, if you use this for your own project, but for the purposes of training, of course, we have some typical data entered in here from a conflict and crisis environment. We'll actually get a chance to analyze this. We've called the communities East and West community. This happened in February. This group is male student. If you page down a bit, you can see we also talked to some female students, some female parents, male parents, etc. So the areas here are already filled in for you because they're the questions that you have been asking in your groups. You also have the response options that we looked at before. One note is if you did translate this into your own language and you want to do the analysis in your own language, you can change these fields, F and G, and it will automatically populate and change where it appears below. So you just need to change it once in the top rows, and then it'll change also. You can also do this if you decided to change the question itself a little bit. It'll change everything below, and also the response options. Maybe you didn't like general school climate, and you wanted it to change to something else. Click on that, and what will appear is a little box asking you, do you really want to change it? You have a chance to change your mind if you click undo, but if you click OK, then it'll change every response option for this below. All right, another thing is the number chosen response. So if you come back to our field form, you can see we had 2 don't report it, 2 complaint box anonymous, 3 school management committee or other. We're looking at question A2 in East Community, DH School. So let's go there. And let's see, let's make sure. We're looking at female students though, so we need to make sure that we're down in the female students for question A2. Here, and what you would do, so 2 said don't report it, 2 said complaint box, 3 said school management committee, and so you'd essentially enter that here. 2 don't report it, 2 complaint box, and then let me just refresh, 3 school management committee. And then you would enter the associated data here. So I'm not going to change it because this is what we're going to use for the analysis, but that's how you'd record it. The notes related to don't report it would go in this cell, the notes related to complaint box would go in this cell, and so on. So that's data entry. Pretty basic stuff. It takes a while, but I think it's completely worth it because you can really organize your notes well. One thing I need to show you now before we get into the analysis, and I'll make this a bit bigger, is column C. This is where you will enter the type of FGD or KI you've done. I've been very vague here in terms of saying female student. You might decide that it's relevant for you to look at the age group of students if you did break the groups according to age. So maybe you had female students age 11 to 13, and then you had another one, female students age 14 to 17. You could enter that here, and what that means is then when you go and look at the analysis tables, which I'm going to show you now, you'll have a different way to disaggregate your data. So this is an analysis table. In Excel, it's called a pivot table, and it's something really worth learning. I encourage you to download a couple of videos on YouTube to have a look about how they work. I'll give you the most basic introduction to pivot tables. But what this has done is it's taken all of the numerical data in the data entry form. Again, I filled it out already with some typical data. And it has summarized the response distributions according to the questions here, so A1, A2, A3, and then also according to the type of FGD or KI you did. So you can see the labels I assigned, and we're going back to column C here. These are the labels that I assigned. You can assign whatever you want, but know that the labels you assign will become the columns, and that will be how the data is analyzed. So this table here enables us to compare male and female students, female and male parents, female and male teachers, and then we have all of the participants here. So if I'm analyzing this, well, what's interesting here? Let me make it bigger. Again, this is not quantitative analysis, okay? This needs to be really, really clear in your head. I'm not going to go and report that 60% of male students in my country believe that bullying between students is the most critical SRGBV risk. No. What I'm going to say is, in our sample of focus group discussion and key informant interviews, a little more than half of the male students said that bullying was an issue, which was the most popular answer across them. What I'm going to look at also is comparing the groups. So let's look at the female and male students and how they differ. What stands out to me is that a larger proportion of female students said that teacher sexual abuse was the main issue, while the male students rarely said that. Only one of all of our participants said that. And so this to me would say, all right, well, there's a difference here. Clearly females are perceiving teacher sexual abuse while boys are perceiving bullying. That's a really important difference. Also note that the female and male parents had very different opinions, but this is where, despite 100%, you need to look at the associated number. It's only one person, so we only had one female parent. Hopefully you'll have more in your real research, but this is just to demonstrate to you, don't rely on percentages in every case, because one, of course, is just a very, very small sample. But it still is interesting to me that all the male parents said bullying, and there were 6 of them, which is a few more. And then if we also look at the teachers, we didn't have any female teachers here, unfortunately. Hopefully we would get them later. But the male teachers didn't seem to see anything about teacher sexual abuse. So you can start analyzing data in this way just by looking at response distributions. But to remind you again, this is not quantitative data, so you don't stop here. And what this database can do is it helps you to really look at these numbers, but then get the notes behind them. So let's say we're still thinking about this question A1, all right? I want to know what male students really said about bullying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click there, and what a new tab appears, and what it's done is it's taken all of the notes of any male students who said bullying between students, and it's broken them down for me. So I can just double click, it expands them for you, and there you have them. I'll zoom in here. And what this has done is it's just literally pulled it from the database, the data entry tab, so you don't need to go and look at all the notes. It's just a really faster, more efficient way to do this. So let's do this again with another Maybe I'm interested in not just the male or female parents, students, and teachers, but I want to know all of the responses of those who said teacher sexual abuse. I can click on the total area. Another tab pops up. Let's expand it a little bit. And here we go. We have all of the responses. And the blank ones mean that simply nobody said this in that group. So you can just focus on the ones that have text. All right? And so this is how you can get a summary of all those. You can still, though, since you looked at the total, it's still correlated with the actual community name, the people who said it, and so on. So you can go back and look. So it's really up to you how you decide to explore the notes. This is just a tool, again, to better organize and navigate through your notes. One more thing I'll show you is that you might have in your study an interest in the differences between communities, and you should, certainly. It's not built into the table, but what I've done here is included a filter for you so that you can click on what is the community that you want to look at. Right now this includes both East and West community, which is what we looked at, but you click on the filter, you can see at the bottom you have East and West community. Maybe I only want to look at West community, so I unclick that, and now I have only data from West community. Maybe I want to bring it back, or only look at East. Toggle with that, and there it goes. Don't worry too much about these numbers. What they correlate with is the focus group label. So if we come back to the data entry tab, then remember each one has a black bar above it. So this is focus group 1, this is focus group 2. So you might, on the side know that focus groups 1 through 10 were of a particular type, and then you could go ahead and filter by numbers here if you want. But if you don't, then East and West is fine as long as you have entered the relevant information in the data entry tab. For your convenience, the questions appear up here just so that you're reminded that question A1 is this and so on. And that really is the basic of the database. I think the more you practice, the more you'll realize that it is a really, really helpful tool for you, and hopefully you enjoy it.